All right, we're good.
All right. So, hello everybody. First of all, first off, I'd like to apologize for the last minute scheduling change for all you guys. Had a little bit of a health thing going on with someone in my family, and we had to kind of push it a day. And Justin was more than accommodating, which was great. I appreciate that. But needless to say, the backstory on me, and I'll get into it. I live in Boston, Massachusetts. I invest up in a market called Manchester, New Hampshire, or located in properties are located in Manchester, New Hampshire. Um, so this presentation, I mean, you're probably looking at the title right now. I mean, I've been investing for the last 4 years. Last two and a half have been full time. Started when I was in my early 20s, and so this presentation, I kind of talk about getting into the business with some of the challenges that I guess a younger investor faces when they get in, and I'll get into that. But I do spend a lot of time in the presentation talking about finding deals and actually fundraising and finding private money and stuff like that. So I think it should be applicable regardless of age, where you're at, experience, stuff like that. And like Justin said, I mean, jump in at any point here and stop me if you have a question, comment, whatever. This is my first time doing one of these on Zoom and stuff, so it's probably going to be a bit of a learning experience while I'm doing it. Speaking of which, I wish my lighting in here was a little bit better. I kind of look like Darth Vader. But all right, so let's go ahead here and start this. All right. I want to move this Zoom menu here just so I can see this a little bit better. Okay. So this is just a quick high-level backstory. So basically 5 years ago, I got my real estate license. I was going to college at the time, University of New Hampshire. And that was really my first foray into the real estate business. Prior to that, I was running a couple of side businesses while I was in school, kind of flipping cars and flipping furniture on Craigslist, which isn't a bad way to make a buck. So I was doing that, but I always wanted to get into real estate. Was addicted to all those HGTV flipping shows and everything like that. So that was my first interest in real estate, was more on the flipping side of the business, which ended up changing and developed into getting interested on the multifamily and the rental side of the business. So I figured the best way to start, get my real estate license. That can't hurt. Really easy to do in New Hampshire, and like most of the New England states, it's like 40 hours of classes. So it took me like a month to get it. So I started selling real estate as well, part-time, family and friends, kind of the, close people in the sphere of influence, started learning the business in that sense. 2016, I bought a 3-unit property. It was my first deal. Financed it with private money. It was a deal I found on Craigslist, a for sale by owner on Craigslist. I happened to be doing a college internship at the time with a guy that used to be a real estate investor that sold off most of his property and was looking to do some private lending, wanted to stay in the business, but in a more passive role. And he ended up financing it for me. And that's really just how I got into the business. And did the burst strategy on that and ended up selling that. So I say I did the burst strategy. That was the goal, was to do the burst strategy there and, buy it with private money, add some value, raise the rents, and then go refinance it. But ran into a bunch of financing problems being a 21-year-old kid with, crappy income and awful tax returns. So I'll get into that later. But so I progressed into, I started flipping some properties. I flipped a few properties in 2018. And between those two, these two time periods, bought a couple of multis and had like 9-10 units. And then I started flipping properties because I ran out of money. I'm taking a big jump here. Fast forward to today, 2020, 25, and have 46 units. And it's all really been the burst strategy, which, I'm sure a lot of the folks on here are familiar with. But basically what I'm looking to talk about. So where did I find the money to do this? Where did the lenders come from? How did I actually structure those deals, and how did I network with those people? What strategies, I focused on, and basically, what strategies should everyone focus on given their resources and money in the bank and their connections? And then I talk about how I got traditional financing, because that was the biggest challenge for me. Was private lending was the easy part, but it was really hard to get into long-term stabilized debt. And I talk about commercial financing and a lot of the financing products I use in order to do that, to get around a lot of the hurdles I had, being, no tax returns really, no W-2, and a lot of the other challenges that folks who are in that position kind of face. So, yeah, I basically just talked about this. So, my strategy in general, utilizing partnerships and private financing to acquire properties at discounted prices, with the intentions of rehabbing, renting, and refinancing. So basically the burst strategy that a lot of people are familiar with. So spent most of my time early in my career, I guess early in my investing lifespan, really figuring out how to find private money and find discounted deals. And really that was just how I figured out how to scale. And it was only until a couple of years ago that I found myself in a position to start buying 20, 30 units a year. And actually built out a lead generation strategy that kind of supported those goals. So I'll start with finding money to buy properties, because this was my first hurdle. I feel like this is a lot of people's initial hurdle when they're looking to scale, or they're looking to, buy distressed properties and kind of do the burst strategy that we all talk about. So private money lenders, hard money lenders, partnerships, and seller financing. I've used all of these before. Like I said, the first private money lender I worked with on my first deal, found him through a college internship I did. He was my manager, believe it or not. And I had just casually talked to him about buying properties and, how I wanted to get into the business. And, it was a year in terms of just having that conversation before we worked together. So there was a lot of time that passed. And I basically asked him one day, I said, hey, if I can bring you a deal that fits this criteria, it's this % below market, there's some income in place to kind of justify lending on it at a higher LTV. It's a simple rehab. Is that something you'd be interested in lending on? And we'd built a relationship at that point, and he said, sure. So that first deal, he did 95% loan to value on. I brought the other 5%, and I funded all the repairs out of my own pocket. 10% interest and a point is what he charged me on that first deal. And I basically follow that same model and that same structure with other private money lenders that I work with now. And so as for hard money lenders, I've worked with plenty of those, and I don't like working with them too much personally, because it's just so darn expensive. And if you're in a BRRRR deal or a multifamily or some kind of rental property where you need to turn over tenants and you need to get tenants out, rehab units, get other tenants in, usually the life cycle on that deal before you get to traditional financing, in my experience, is usually around 6 to 9 months at a minimum. And hard money on a deal like that is just, it's hard to justify it. At least with the deals that I'm doing. If you find a really great deal, obviously, anything can pencil out if the deal is good enough, but paying 12, 13% interest and a couple of points and all the transactional fees is hard to do. I have used them though, when the private money lenders in my network are at capacity in terms of what they have, kind of out on the street, lent out. And those are usually easy to find in my experience. A couple of referrals from investors will get you there, or Google searches. Bigger Pockets has a ton of them on there. So for me, it's always been, I try to work with private money lenders as much as I can. So partnerships, done a number of partnership deals where I'll partner with other investors in the market, do some kind of simple equity partnership where there's a buyout option. When I didn't have much money to put to work, I would, one of the deals I did, it was actually the second deal I did after I did the first deal with that private money lender, and he only wanted to lend on one deal at a time with me. So I was back to square one after that. But I went to a local real estate meetup, found an investor that was looking to buy more rentals. And we just went 50-50 on a deal. I brought the deal. He had a private money lender in his network that did 85% loan to value on that. We both split the remaining 15%. And, but I basically wrote into our operation agreement that I could buy him out if we just did an appraisal minus 10%. So it was basically structuring the deal so that if I were to buy him out of the LLC, he would still earn a premium on the initial equity he invested. And that's what I ended up doing. When we went to refinance, I bought him out when we refinanced because we added enough value for me to do that. And he was okay with the arrangement because his returns were there no matter what. So there was some flexibility there. And I've done, kind of creative stuff like that on other deals in the past as well. Some like active partner and limited partner type relationships, but it's a good way to get around, not having a lot of money, excuse me. And then seller financing. I think everyone's pretty familiar with seller financing. It's like the first thing I ask when I talk to a motivated seller is, do you have a mortgage and what do you plan on doing with the money? If they don't know, it's usually an opportunity to pitch seller financing at some kind of rates that make sense to you. So I've done a couple of deals where the seller will finance 85% with some kind of 2-year balloon on that. So they're basically the private money lender for the deal. And, if they're confident in you as a borrower and as an investor, that conversation tends to go pretty easily if they don't really know what to do with the money. And for me, it's allowed me to buy more deals because if they charge a low interest rate, I know that I can, not have to rush to get to a refinance and really take my time to turn around the property and not have to, pay so much in holding costs. That's a quick overview of how I approach the financing side and how I've been finding lenders. And this, diving deeper, but how do we actually find these folks? So private money, family, friends, sphere, that's obvious. If you know of any family member or friends that are in real estate that have a couple of bucks, that have a good job, I found that the pitch to folks in your network that are, paid well or have a good job or have some assets is pretty simple. If you're not proposing large dollar amounts, at least that's how it was for me. So, I've raised private money from, a couple of lawyers in my network or just lawyers I've met who work at title companies, stuff like that. And, told them I'll pay them 11, 12% for, second position mortgages, so long as we don't exceed this loan to value for the property. And there's a lot of opportunities to get creative with private money lenders, but it always just comes down to networking. And one that I should include in here that I forgot to put in here before I finish this up was prior, just previous folks or folks that are previously on real estate, excuse me. So many of the lenders that I've worked with and that people in my network who I know have worked with are, typically on the older side, maybe 60s, 70s. They understand the real estate business. They had a portfolio. Maybe they got to the point in their life where they wanted to sell it. And they just don't know what to do with the money, but they understand that real estate is a great tool. And they don't really want to go earn like 4% in the stock market or something like that. So they do private money lending at 10, 11%. So if you know of anyone who's kind of getting out of the real estate business or liquidating some of their properties, it's a really good source, potential source of private money. And then hard money, like I said, it's not too hard to find private money lenders. It's just, searching. They're usually companies. They got a page on Google, a website, and they're looking for borrowers, especially right now. And again, networking will probably get you connections to the best ones, the ones that are doing business locally. And that's really how I found mine. And then, partnerships, obviously all of this is all networking, right? It's like a long way of saying that you got to go out and meet people that are doing business in your market. But partnerships, family, friends, same pitch, right? Hey, do you want to earn 10% on your money, and let's go ahead and buy this piece of real estate together? And it's just a sales, it's a sales pitch at that point. Obviously you don't want to come in cold to these interactions. And I think the best thing to do in terms of finding investors and finding partners is to regularly document and discuss what you do to the people in your network so that, if someone is interested in potentially working with you, they come to you, and that conversation is more warm than, hey, my uncle's a lawyer and I'm just going to go give him a call and ask him if he wants to go buy this duplex with me. It's always better to discuss it on an ongoing basis and, talking about it on social media or Facebook, just, when you're around these people or however you do it, right? It's, it makes these conversations so much easier. And almost always these folks come to you rather than you going to them. And again, like-minded investors. I mean, when I first started, I was always I had a big, real scarcity mindset. Like I was always like, I got to find the deals for myself, and I got to, I don't want to really work with anyone. There's, why would anyone want to, refer me a deal, or why would anyone want to bring me a deal, or why would I want to do that to, somebody else? I always thought people were just looking for their own stuff, but, especially as you get larger, large is a relative term, but, 10 plus unit multifamily buildings or whatever it is, right? There's enough room there to actually work and partner on those deals. And especially with flips too, which is, a little bit different than what I'm talking about here, but flips especially, it's like, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to that transaction, and it's defined, right? The exit is getting out of it. So that partnership doesn't have to last more than 6, 9, 10 months. And I've partnered on a number of deals. I knew a couple of wholesalers that were signing contracts, and they'd make 7, 8, 9, 10 grand an assignment. And the only reason they weren't doing more deals is they didn't have the lending lined up, and they didn't have the network of the contractors and everything like that. And I partnered with a couple of wholesalers and said, why don't we close these deals? You're finding the deal. We'll figure out how the money works out and how the equity gets divided. And I can, the value I bring is bringing the lending and the contractors to the equation. And those always work. I mean, at least in my experience, those have always historically worked out pretty well, because it's, it's a definition of a win-win. And then seller financing, when it's obviously, you're going to talk to the seller, but it's an opportunity to get creative, especially with maybe sellers being willing to take a second mortgage of some kind of small dollar amount and further reduce kind of your need to bring cash to the table. But the constant here, it's creativity is really important. Whether it's the interest payments, the terms, how you divide the debt and the equity, it's all unique, especially when you're dealing with private money lenders and partnerships and seller financing. Hard money guys are typically pretty like standard, in my opinion. They're like, you got to pay your 12 and 2 or 12 and 3. And we do, this is our program, and that's pretty much it. So, it's like, I guess, you kind of get it, it's relative to the amount of work you got to put in to speak with them. But I'm all about, putting deals together creatively and structuring them creatively, and, private money and seller financing and partnerships allow you to do that.
Hey, Axel, real quick.
Sure.
When you're doing when you're using a private lender, you're giving them first position, obviously, when you close. Now, when you go to do your refi, you're not giving them equity most times, right? You're just cashing them out, and then you're taking full equity.
Yeah, exactly. My preference is to never, kind of partner on the equity side of the deal with people unless I absolutely have to, because that just introduces so many more variables. And, now you got, someone that you got to answer to or work with on the deal in perpetuity if you're just looking to hold it long term. So the vast majority of my deals have just been private money lender puts up the money for a first position mortgage, and then they get, removed upon refinance, basically kicked out by the, whoever's coming in to do that financing, the bank or the credit union.
Right. And what kind of refi you working with, like a community bank or a bigger bank? Do they require any type of seasoning now? Because the one that I did most recently, and this is the first time this happened, and it was because of COVID, they required a 6-month occupancy by the tenant before they would give me a refi. So basically it was a bird deal. So I bought it, rehabbed it, and I think it was like 3 weeks, and I got a tenant in like another 2 weeks. But they required a 6-month, seasoning period where the tenant occupied it before they would give me a refi loan. So just what experience you might have had with that.
Yeah. So I'll briefly touch on that in a bit, but I think in general, what I've seen is a lot of the folks that are going out to get the 30-year fixed rate, kind of Fannie Mae loans on their 1 to 4 units. Yeah, the seasoning is getting pretty tight on those. And that's, probably coming down from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac in terms of what they're requiring to buy a loan from these lenders that are sourcing them locally. So I think seasoning is more of an issue on loans like that, 1 to 4 unit kind of conventional 30-year fixed rate loans. Pretty
This
much
one was actually a commercial loan.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I was going to say
local
that
community bank.
Yeah, and I have seen that as well too. I think I've found, at least locally, it is such a wide array of just the local banks and the local credit unions. Like, you'll talk to one bank and they're just saying, hey, we're literally just not doing refinances right now. And then you'll talk to another bank who's saying, yeah, we'll do 80% loan to value and, 10-year fixed, 25-year amortization. And you're like, it's crazy that 2 banks can have such a differing view right now. But I think it's become harder, at least in my experience, to do cash out refinances where I've owned the property for less than a year. So I feel like that is a restraint that a lot of the local banks that I've worked with historically, they didn't have that a year ago. And now they're like, I'll give you 80% of what your cost is, or 75% of what your cost is, not of the appraised value. That's been the biggest change I've seen. And yeah, some of them do have that seasoning period that they're requiring, but I haven't seen that as much as really just the ownership seasoning period in terms of the tenant being their seasoning. But I'll touch on that too in a little bit as well. So this is, I mean, while you look for money, right? I mean, this is kind of, I guess this is geared towards, folks that are newer or looking to get in and maybe don't have a lot of money in the bank to get into the business, and they're trying to figure out how to, buy property with low money down. Really the best, and I guess this does apply to folks that are looking to scale as well. Maybe you bought a couple of properties last year, you're looking to buy, 10 this year or 7 this year, whatever. For me, build credit is more applicable to folks that are newer who are younger, right? So that's obvious. And I, maybe won't spend too much time on that, but obviously it's important to make sure that your credit is figured out. And at a higher level, that could be your debt to income. That can just be your credit score. Just making sure that what you have on your credit report isn't going to be damaging. Increasing your income is really just the biggest one. So banks want to see liquidity and they want to see historical income on your tax returns. I didn't have great tax return income because I didn't have a real W-2, and a lot of what I was making was deductible in terms of, being an active real estate professional in the eyes of the IRS. So I always had trouble with, this is something that I've always had trouble with. But it's so helpful to just increase your income in terms of showing better figures on your tax returns and increasing your lendability to banks. And if you start a side hustle, obviously, oftentimes, the IRS doesn't really know what's going on there. But at least that kind of helps build your reserves and your liquidity, which is something that you can show a bank. I think that's just kind of like an obvious one, but it's something that people overlook, right? They're so focused on finding deals and trying to figure out how to buy property, they forget that just increasing your day job income, for lack of a better way to put it, is often the easiest way to get there. And then building reserves. If you want to buy more property, you need to make sure you have enough money in the bank to service the debt and to deal with unforeseen issues and to handle vacancies, everything like that. This is something that I struggled with a couple of years ago. Was I would stretch myself a little thin. I'd get a few deals under contract, and a lot of my money was going to transactional costs and down payments and things like that. And I'd find myself getting to a point to where, I was, not banking on credit for reserves or for unforeseen problems, because that's, obviously an awful idea. But getting to the point where I was like, okay, I got to take my foot off the gas here. I got to make sure I build my reserves and have, 6 months of interest payments and principal payments on these buildings, and make sure I can deal with a furnace breaking and everything like that. And it's hard to do that when you're consistently buying and holding rather than flipping or wholesaling or, kind of earning some short-term income. So, this is applicable for those, I guess, who are looking to scale a buy and hold portfolio. But it's easy to let to forget about your reserves when you're doing that. And then really just, while you're looking for money, looking for private lending, looking for deals, and obviously networking is so critical. And that's really how you get all this stuff. The investors and the real estate agents and the attorneys are going to be the referrals for a lot of the private money connections, and agents, investors, contractors. I mean, they're going to be the ones that are referring a lot of the deals and a lot of the, the people that you need to know in the business. It's all just a spider web, right? It's like once you just start placing a real intentional focus on meeting people, then the entire business just gets easier because your Rolodex gets bigger and you know who to call for all your problems. So, again, this slide, I guess, is more applicable to those who are early in their career, but I think it's like just good lessons in general. So, where am I finding deals? And this is probably a good snapshot of the last 12 to 18 months. COVID really just, kind of threw a monkey wrench into everything here. But these little house icons, my great design skills here are kind of representative of where my deals are coming from in terms of where most of them are coming from relative to the other strategies. So, I'll kind of start at my bottom and work the way up. Direct prospecting. So what I mean by that is finding, buying a list off of ListSource or building a list of addresses or, however you source the addresses of the properties that you think you might be interested in. That's step one. And what I found is really, really successful, at least for me, is whether it's skip tracing their phone number or their email, or going into their LLC filing and finding who the individual is on there and then finding their email. And, there's a number of services out there that can help you do that. But basically just getting the owner's name, getting their contact information, and just reaching out through email and just saying, hey, my name is this is what I do. I own property in the area. Your property seems like something that we might be interested in buying. Would you be interested in talking about it? And taking a really low pressure sales approach to that, or just a low pressure prospecting kind of approach, has been really helpful for me. And this is really how I found most of my deals the last 18 months, is just going direct to seller through email. And it's something that can be so easily systematized or outsourced if you just really don't feel like doing it. Finding the information is easy, and then just copy paste next, and just do. For me, I would just do it at night while I was watching TV. I'd send out 30, 40 emails, just, kind of mindlessly, and just start having conversations with sellers. Right. I mean, my goal was, obviously I'd like to buy the property that I'm reaching out about, but if I can just build a relationship with these guys and, meet another investor in the market, the deals will just come. And that's really that's the approach I took, and it worked out, I would say, pretty well for me. And just got to meet a lot of other investors in my local market that have been referral sources for other things, agents or contractors and, subcontractors, whoever. So that's been a big one for me, and doing it with intentionality, I guess, is going to be my last point before I move on a little bit. But, building out some kind of system and getting a free CRM, getting the names in there, kind of tracking your follow-up, like, this is going to be the first email I send. I'm going to send them another email 2 weeks from now if I don't see a response. And after that, I'll send them another one a month from now. And, trying to build some infrastructure around it rather than just kind of jerry-rigging it on an Excel sheet and just doing it by memory. Because all these deals come after like the third or fourth or fifth contact. And I think those who are, in sales kind of know that that's, they know that statistic is just 70% of your deals come after you contact someone 5 times. But it's like easy to forget and to lose track, from 1 to 5. So, I used a CRM it's literally called Less Annoying CRM. It was $10 a month. Just threw all my information in there, and then it would just set reminders, and I'd, block off 5-6 hours a week to do that. And, worked out pretty well. And then wholesalers, I've bought a lot of deals off wholesalers, and I've structured it in a bit of a unique way. I guess, the traditional model is the wholesaler ties up the contract and they go to market it to their buyers list. And it's, traditionally how people work with wholesalers. And I've done deals like that. That being said, a lot of wholesalers, at least in my experience, are just predominantly marketing to single family homeowners, and they're assigning their contracts to people that are looking to flip homes. And I've had, conversations with numerous wholesalers basically saying, hey, if you find something in your marketing or you stumble across someone that's got some kind of a multifamily that doesn't really work for your buyers list, instead of passing on it, or instead of, not knowing what to do with it, or just not, basically let's figure out how to monetize that lead for you. And there's a number of ways to do that, right? I mean, for me, I basically said, find the address. I'll sign a kind of 1-page NDA, 1-page contract saying, if I buy this property in the next 12 months, I'll give you 1% of the purchase price. And I'll just take it from, if you just get me the address, the name, or whatever, I'll just speak with the seller. And if I close it, great. And I'll give you a referral fee. And I found a lot of wholesalers, they just don't know what to do with their multifamily leads if they're predominantly marketing to single family folks. And that's been like an unbelievable lead source for me. Especially as I've tried to go bigger, tried to buy stuff that's like 7-8+ units where, maybe they can tie up a duplex, and you got some people that are willing to flip a duplex or buy and hold the duplex. But once you get it, the bigger you get in that equation, the more, the less folks on a wholesaler's buyers list are interested in that. And I'm actually doing a deal right now on a 7-unit where wholesaler was reaching out to a guy with a single family house. He says, hey, I'm not looking to sell this, but I got this 7-unit that I'm looking to sell. And he's like, literally, it worked out perfectly. It was like, I got no one in my buyers list that's really interested in it. The margins are like a little bit too borderline. It's like kind of like 80% of market. My buyers list is really looking for stuff that's deeply discounted, especially right now. And, the way I looked at it, I said, okay, why don't I just talk to the seller, see what we can do? And I arranged a seller financing deal on that, where I'm paying a little bit more in terms of a purchase price, but the building's relatively stabilized, doesn't need a lot of work. and I have low interest payments, 3% interest for 2 years. So a deal like that just came out of casually telling a wholesaler, hey man, you find stuff that doesn't work for you, like just shoot it my way and we'll just make it a win-win. And he'll make 1% on that. He wouldn't have made any money. It's it's such a win-win scenario. So referrals is another, especially for multifamily deals. Referrals is a big lead generation source. And for me, it's like I just tell every single person I know that I do real estate, what I'm looking to buy, what I'm looking to, what kind of properties that I'm looking for. An example of this specifically would be, so I used to work with a contractor who I don't work with anymore because he ended up being a terrible contractor. But when we first started working together, he did a lot of work for other investors. And I said, hey man, you find any investors that are looking to sell, connect me with them. And, I'll give you a referral fee and make it worth your while, whatever it might be. And oftentimes people aren't even looking for referral fees. They're just looking for work who are subcontractors, contractors or contractors. And, turns out he did some work for a guy who was older that was looking to sell, connected me with him. And I bought 3 of his properties. It was 9 units, 3 unit buildings. It was just a matter of telling him that I was looking to buy that stuff. And that's been a situation that's happened with contractors. It's happened with, it's happened with agents, just in terms of agents, working with sellers who maybe it's too much of a problem property. Maybe their timeline's too short. Maybe that just doesn't really fit what they traditionally broker, for any multitude of reasons. Maybe it's like, it's a 3 unit property. They're evicting 2 tenants. That's a hard property to put on the MLS because you can't even show it. So, it was an example of another property I bought, and just a function of telling everyone that's what you do, has really, at least for me, kind of drummed up a lot of business. And then the MLS, I've done some deals on the MLS. It's just a function of writing a lot of offers, and looking for mismarketed properties. So something that I do a lot is I just get on the MLS in the morning. Since I have my license, I'll kind of look at all the new listings, and I'll look at all the properties that have 2-bedroom units that are 1,100 plus square feet. And it's a clear opportunity to just add a 3rd bedroom. So, I look for unique opportunities like that, or properties that are kind of mismarketed, or properties that are distressed. And I have, alerts set up for keywords for that stuff, in my MLS system. And I think that's something you can set up with any agent. Most MLS systems kind of allow you to do that. And then I just write a lot of offers, and, the acceptance rate's low, but it's produced a couple of deals. And then I also do like very little direct mail. I do maybe 300 mailers every 3 months, to a very targeted specific list. I handwrite the envelopes. I basically type out on a professional letterhead, same messaging that I sent through email. And that works. And then Craigslist is the big one. I say big one. I say Craigslist is a small one, but it's the big one for me because that's where I did my first deal. But emailing for rent ads and basically putting up a I buy multifamily properties ad on Craigslist has actually, generated a lot of conversations. For me, it's contacting folks that have their properties for rent is how I found deals on Craigslist mainly. That first deal I found was a for sale by owner, but that was the only deal I've done in that situation where it was a for sale by owner on there. But contacting for rent ads, it's similar to direct prospecting through email. The goal for me is just meet another investor and kind of build a relationship and stay top of mind for when they're looking to sell. So totally forgot I made this slide. Basically just said everything on here. But, I guess a closing comment, after before I skip this one is, for me, a big mindset shift I had a year and a half ago, a couple of years ago, is being top of mind when you're looking to buy multifamily or, however you define that, 3-4 plus unit buildings, is like the most important thing. You can do direct to seller marketing, and there is a lot of transactional business that happens there in terms of hitting someone with a piece of direct mail who inherited the property and wants to sell it. And, that's the only business you'll do with them. That's certainly happened with me, and that happens with a lot of investors. But what I've found is the best deals I've done have been from investors who own a lot of property and are relatively sophisticated individuals. I've bought, I think, 15 units off of a guy that owns 100 units in the marketplace. He's just older, and he was like, I just don't feel like hiring an agent and having them bring a bunch of people through here and disturbing the tenants. So let's just figure something out. And we come up with prices that were win-win. So for me, I think that a big misconception is you have to find distressed properties or distressed owners, when a lot of the times people will just trade, an absolute market or above market sales price for convenience. And that's where private lending comes in. If you can find good private lenders and make transactions, easy from start to finish, and, get your inspection done quick, or don't even do an inspection, or just, don't have to, don't bring an appraiser through there and make them go into every unit, or just make it easy for the seller to just say yes to what you're doing and make your terms competitive. For me, that's been a successful strategy. And for me, the relationship thing and staying top of mind is real important, because, 20% of the owners own 80% of the property. I mean, it's that rule holds pretty true. And that 20%, they'll probably sell you multiple buildings over a numerous, year time period. So I bought a building from a guy in 2017. I bought another building from him in 2019, and they were both 80% of value, great deals where I refied all my money out. And it was just a function of it being easy for them. So I think that's an important thing to mention, because I think that's sometimes a misconception with going like direct to sellers. You just got to find the building that's all completely banged up and looks like shit, when in reality, it doesn't. A lot of the deals that I've done are just painting, carpet in some of the units, and there you go. And next thing you know, you paid 400, it's worth 5, and you put 20 grand into it or something like that. So anyways, just an aside, I guess. So here's an example of a Craigslist deal. And I was on Craigslist the other day, and, I spend maybe a couple hours a week on Craigslist just looking at the for sale by owners. I'm sure no one on this call knows where Hooksett, New Hampshire is, but it's basically a town in central New Hampshire that's 15 minutes outside of the biggest city in New Hampshire. That's, I say biggest city. I mean, you guys are in New Jersey, you can think it's peanuts, but 120,000 people is the biggest city in New Hampshire, called Manchester, and Hooksett's kind of like a neighboring town. So I say that to paint the picture. This isn't, in the middle of absolute nowhere. This is a solid market. So this is a for sale by owner. I just went on there, and I was just looking at some for sale by owners, and this caught my eye. I have a pretty good idea of what the price points are up there. So I figured I'd screenshot it and talk about it and just show. I mean, like, there's opportunities on Craigslist, there's opportunities outside of the MLS, outside of what an agent will bring you. And it's funny that I say, I actually contacted this guy. So I'm like, I was getting a little fed up with Craigslist because it wasn't producing any results. And then I happened to strike gold here. But this is I'll get to the description here, but basically it's a 1,500 square foot duplex that the seller's using, or the seller has configured as a single family and is renting to one tenant. Price point's $140,000 on it. Here's the description. I mean, it's, obviously I don't expect you guys to read this whole thing, but it's basically a duplex that's being used as a single family. Basically total assessment is 178. He has it listed for 140, or is asking 140, which is at face value, pretty good deal. Properties typically sell for considerably above assessed value. In my market, might be different in New Jersey where you guys are, but I just listed the highlights at the bottom. Property is currently being used as a single family, but is zoned as a duplex. So you can just convert it to 2 units there. Recent plumbing and electrical updates, newer insulation, recent roof. So the big ticket items are taken care of, which is like, for me, that's the most important thing that I look at. I don't want to be spending money on non-value add renovations, something that doesn't increase the value too much or raise the rent too much. Seller states that the house would need renovation if the tenants were to leave, mainly bathrooms and kitchens. So yeah, you're probably going to have to put, 40 grand into it. If you're doing a couple of units, I don't know if there's 2 kitchens or if you got to add a kitchen, maybe that increases the price a little bit, but it seems like just purely based on asking price and, what the town assessment is, and the fact that he's supposedly, obviously, done some, some of the more capital expenditure type renovations. Seems like there's some upside. Figured I'd show you guys this, right? Here's some comps, right? And I'm an agent, so I just jumped on here and did this. This is literally the property next door. I couldn't fit the dates on the screenshot, but this closed 6 months ago at 180. That other one's listed at 140. Similar square footage, similar type of build. Price points right now in my area are significantly higher right now than they were 6 months ago. So, this is leading me to believe, all right, if this is renovated, it did have a lot of that CapEx stuff done. Maybe it's a $200,000 property. Maybe that's what it would appraise for. Here's another one. This one's under contract, so it hasn't closed. on the same street. It's worth, listed at 175. I don't know what I don't know, what it's under contract for, obviously, but similar square footage, similar build, again, goes to show that there's some meat on the bone here, right? Maybe it doesn't make sense at 140. Maybe the number's got to be 110, but there's something here. So now I'll jump to rehabs quickly, and we're getting towards the end of the presentation here as well. And I'm going to close out on rehabs and some of the other high level stuff that I've learned. This is where I've gotten absolutely burned in the business, is just hiring awful contractors, or say hiring awful, right? When you hire them, you don't think they're awful, but then they turn out to be awful. And that's always a nice revelation. And basically not cutting corners, but looking at price as a main indicator of who I want to hire and who I need to work with. And as I've done more rehabs, I've realized that just isn't the case. So I always get multiple quotes, cheapest isn't always best. That aligns with kind of my last bullet point on here. Speed is where I've really gotten burned when doing rehabs. If you're hiring a contractor who's got like a 3-man crew and he's doing 3 jobs or 2 jobs, he's probably going to be at your job 2 days a week, and it's going to take you 2.5 times longer than what he's telling you, or what you're kind of expecting. So for me, the first question I ask any contractor now is, what are the jobs you want and how many people are on your crew full time? That's like critical information for me, because I want someone on my job 5 days a week. And if you're not, it's just, speed is so important, especially when you're using hard money and private money or something that's not a traditional mortgage. You can't afford to have a rehab that's supposed to take 2 months, take 6 months. Like it's going to kill you. And I've ran into that situation so many times. And it's hard, right? It's hard to really assess that. It's hard to fact check that with a contractor, but you kind of go on gut, and that's really something that I try and do my best due diligence on. Second thing is get everything in writing, scope of work, down to light switches, right? Like I get my scope of work so granular, and I write it myself, and then I work with the contractor to fine tune it. I don't let contractors write scopes of work anymore, because they often leave them broad, and it makes it easier for unexpected costs to come up. Oh, we didn't talk about, you wanted to do these light fixtures. I didn't bid that out. That's going to be an extra, however much money. So I get everything down to the type of paint, the type of flooring, the type of light fixtures, the type of switch plates, the type of, sinks, type of faucets, everything. So for me, I've gotten everything down. And then the important thing is I get the timeline down in writing and how I actually pay the contractors. So, once these light fixtures are in and the paint is done and the flooring is done in these rooms, okay, I'll pay you X amount. And I basically try and go a third with everyone I work with in terms of how I pay them. A lot of this is stuff you guys probably already know. And this is, a lot of it's common knowledge. You obviously don't want to pay people too much up front, but for me, setting the expectation and getting it in writing screens out a lot of the bad contractors, because once they see that you're that organized and that's you're putting that much attention on, they're probably not going to work with you, or they're probably just going to understand that this is not a situation they want to put themselves in. And then for me, squeaky wheel gets the grease. Like you just got to babysit, and it's tough. I invest in a market that I live an hour, 10 minutes away from, hour, 20 minutes away from. It's hard to be on site every time that you want your guys working. So for me, I do a lot of phone calls. I do a lot of FaceTimes. I get up there twice a week as much as I can. I'll pay agents or something like that. If there's a key part of the job that's getting done and I'm getting asked for payment, I'll give someone $50 to just go drive over there. And, it's the function of having good people on your team, but you just got to babysit, and you got to stay on top of contractors. And if you find one where you don't have to do that, then I'll probably just start investing in New Jersey, because that's someone I want to work with. But it's so hard to find guys that are self-motivated and are actually there 8 hours a day and working. And then this is an obvious one, but treat your good ones really well. I mean, just pay them extremely quickly, right? If they do get it done and they are following the contract, pay them. Make a point to pay them the next day so they can get their guys paid and they want to keep working for you. There's nothing contractors hate more than owners or, their customers taking forever to pay them. So that's something that I really prioritize, is getting people paid quickly. And I think the good contractors really appreciate people that understand they're part of the business, and like setting clear expectations and making it easy to communicate with you. Like I try and make it so that no one has to ask me a question unless it's something unforeseen in the rehab, like throughout the whole process. Like I don't want you to call me asking me what kind of, what kind of sink I want, what kind of fridge I want, like all that stuff. I try and get all that stuff out of the way early, set all the time frames in the beginning. And if you're working with a contractor that isn't working out, I mean, just get out of it. Like, don't try and convince the guy to get there more. Don't try and convince him to redo his work. Don't try and get him to find new subcontractors, because it's just never going to happen. It's sometimes you just got to, fire him and move on and eat the loss. And then as for refinancing, right, the last part of the process, Justin, this kind of relates to what you were talking about earlier in terms of what we're doing now too, in terms of working with local banks, local credit unions. You can never know too many lenders. I have a few lenders that I work with on everything, but I still talk to new lenders because you never know, what banks are changing their programs, or what, sometimes banks have a real urge to lend in a certain period of time, and you want to be someone they're thinking of. For me, the big ones are loan to value, amortization lengths, and interest rates. And interest rates, like the obvious one, but I want to work with banks that are doing 75 or 80% of appraised value when I go to refinance a property. Like what me and Justin were talking about, most banks right now are doing, at least in my experience in my market, most banks are doing loan to cost. So whatever your cost into the property is, that's what they're loaning on, which, doesn't help you when you're doing renovations and adding value. So it's getting a little tricky to find people that are willing to do appraised value without a long seasoning period, but those are the lenders I look for. Amortization lengths, for me, I'm getting commercial financing, basically because I still, even at this point in my career, I can't get conventional 30-year fixed rate financing on 1 to 4 properties, because my 1 to 4 unit properties, because my tax returns are all over the place. My debt to income's a little crazy. I don't have a W-2, and I still don't really fit in that box. So I have to work with local banks, local credit unions to do commercial financing, where they're underwriting the asset first and the borrower second, rather than borrower first, asset second. And then they're worried about things like debt service coverage ratio. And, the terms are a little bit more negotiable, and they're not too concerned with me having, weird tax returns or something like that. They're keeping the loans on their books. So it's more of a relationship-based loan than anything else, relationship and asset-based. So for me, I look for that 75, 80% of value. I look for 25-year amortization with my commercial loans, so that my payments aren't too much higher than, traditional 30-year stuff. And interest rates are important, and right now they're good. I'm getting stuff in low 4s to high 4s, which for commercial loans, I feel is pretty solid. Folks that are out there getting that 30-year fixed rate stuff in the 3s will probably think that's bad, but I don't mind. A year ago, I was getting low 5s, mid 5s. So for me, I've done all my refinancing with small, and when I say small, I mean like 3-4 branches in 2-county area type local banks, small local credit unions, where, they got 1 or 2 folks in their lending department that are out there, drumming up business, and you can do a number of deals and you can build a relationship, and they'll give you, flexible terms, and they care more about the property than you. And that's what's important for me. So here's a sample deal. I bought this one almost a year ago, exactly here, August 31st, 2019. This is a 6-unit multifamily. I got into contact with the seller through email prospecting, bought a list off ListSource. He had a lot of equity, just found his email, reached out to him, asked him if he was interested in selling, followed up a couple of times, and he reached out and said he was. And this seller it kind of fits that prototype that I was mentioning earlier, where he was in no position of distress. He owned the property free and clear, and he just had a bunch of property on the other side of the state, and was like, I live an hour away, I self-manage, I just don't want to deal with this anymore. And he was a little bit unfamiliar with kind of the market dynamics, the market pricing at that point. So there wasn't even much negotiating to do. He wanted 510. I started in the the low to mid 4s, but he was flexible on price, and we kind of jumped around on price for a couple of weeks, and eventually he was at like 485, and I said, all right, I'll do 485. But I need, if you're willing to do seller financing for a year at 0% interest, I'll give you a balloon at that point. And he was open to that. He didn't need the money right away. So he did it at 75% loan to value, 0% interest, forgetting the loan amount off the top of my head. While we were in contract, two of the heating systems just broke. So we just, took 10K off of the price there to kind of compensate for that. So at the end of the day, I was in for 475. And I funded part of the down payment with a private lender who I'd done a few deals with. I basically asked him if he was interested in doing a second mortgage yet. It was roughly, I think it was like 7.5% of the purchase price. So it was roughly, I think off the top of my head, it was roughly 30 grand or so. So what I ended up bringing to the table was about 16, 17% of the purchase price to the deal, which is still a healthy chunk of change for a deal that big, but I just sold a couple of properties and I had the money. And I probably could have done gotten more funding on the second private mortgage. And the sales pitch there was, this is a fully occupied property. Each unit was renting for $1,400. So the overall income for the building was $8,400 a month. As is, like, day I closed before doing any renovations, whatever, was probably high fives the way I saw it. So in reality, he had a second mortgage, but it was a low risk second mortgage. And I think that's important to understand, is if you're buying a deal day one that's at significantly below market price, you have some flexibility to play with a second mortgage, especially if you have a private lender or you're doing seller financing where there's no loan stipulations about, you can't have a second mortgage. That's, traditional lenders just not going to let you do that. So we got creative on this one. And then there was just like no rehab to do. It was so simple. I ended up finding a guy to fix one of the heating systems for $500. And then the other one I had to replace for $5,000. And then I turned over two of the units, paint and carpet. Flooring was fine. It's like 6-7K a unit. Did some common area stuff, kept the tenants in there, and put in two new tenants that leases ran out at $1,500 a month. And it appraised 6 months later at $685, which I thought was high. I thought the building was worth low sixes, but sometimes you get lucky and your appraisals come in just, real high, and, pulled all my money out of this one and more. And it's like it kind of aligns with that story I was telling earlier about, the seller wasn't motivated. It wasn't like overly motivated. He was motivated because he didn't want to be there, but he wasn't financially motivated, and the property was producing, but he just didn't really want it anymore. He was a unique guy to where he just wanted to save on closing costs and didn't want to hire a broker. And he just didn't understand the market because he owned property on the other side of the state. So, he was like started at 510. I would have paid 510 for it. I negotiated because I felt like there was an opportunity to do so. And, we just creatively put it together and it worked out. So obviously that's a great way. That's a good result, and it doesn't go like that every time. So, when a rehab goes long and over budget, I feel like any major rehab I've done, this has happened. Anything that starts to get into bathrooms, kitchens, something that isn't caused like just paint, flooring, it's always going to go longer than you think. Sometimes you rent your units less than you project, and that's going to affect your ability to get a good appraisal. And it's going to affect your ongoing cash flow. And, those result in you having to bring more cash to close a refi. So sometimes maybe you're all in at that 85% of loan to value. Your lender will give you 80%, and you got to bring 5%. And, it's not a loss. You still have a good deal in terms of what you're paying in perpetuity, but you need to make sure you have reserves and cash in the bank to deal with a scenario like that. And that's where, it ties back into the reserves being important that I was talking about earlier. Even if you're getting into a great deal and you have, you get someone to finance the whole purchase and everything goes well, maybe your rehab goes a little bit longer. You got to come out of pocket more than you thought for the rehab. And next thing you know, you're looking at the HUD statement on a refinance and you got to bring 15, 20 grand or something to the table because it went a little far, it just didn't go as well as you planned. How are you going to plan for that scenario? Because it does happen, and it's not abnormal. So this is what it looks like when it doesn't go well. This is a duplex in a town called Derry, New Hampshire. Great town. Home to the biggest high school in the United States, believe it or not. That's where I went to high school, 4,000 kids in this high school. So it was a duplex, needed to work with an unfinished attic that had enough space to be finished and used as living space. And my plan was to put a couple of bedrooms and a bathroom up there and turn this 2-1 unit into a 4-2, which more or less doubled the rent. So purchased it with private money financing, and a lot of what I talked about going wrong did go wrong, or what's likely to go wrong did go wrong, where the contractor that I hired, had to pull electrical permits to run electrical up into the attic. He hired a subcontractor that didn't do that. We found out after he installed all of the electrical, and after I had, I basically paid him for, I believe it was a third, and I was about to write him a check for the second third. I was asking him, when we had the building permit scheduled. He just said he never pulled a permit, and I said, I can't pay you. Like, this is something that we need to figure out. Then he disappeared, so I just lost a third payment on that. Try and take the people to small claims court and do everything you can to recover that money, but sometimes that's just what happens. Then the contractor that I had hired to do a lot of the drywall finishing, stuff like that, he had hired a guy on his crew that ended up getting into some drug problems, some alcohol problems. And this guy was doing basically what I said. He was on multiple jobs. He was managing guys at 2 different locations. This guy put up all the drywall, didn't tape it correctly, and basically the mudding was just falling off the drywall, and all the drywall was completely useless. Just an absolute nightmare scenario. And one of those situations where I'm living an hour and a half away from this particular market, and I got up there on a Friday at the end of the week. He'd been doing drywall for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it was all junk. We just had to do it all over again. And basically, the way we had worked it out with the contractor, I made him eat most of it. I still had to come out of pocket just to get the job going, because he had to go out and buy more materials, and he had to go find another individual to do the work. And it kicked the project out another week and a half to take it down and redo it correctly. And a lot of these things just end up piling together and extending the life cycle of the project. What was supposed to be a 4-month rehab to turn over the second unit to build out this attic ended up taking 8.5 months. And there's a number of other things that ended up happening too, in terms of getting inspectors out and having problems on the town side, in terms of getting inspectors out and having long lead times, longer than I originally anticipated. And while we were doing the deal, both heating systems, forced hot water boilers just died, just exploded. So we had to replace 2 heating systems while we were doing all this. So long way of saying, went way over budget, took way longer, way more holding costs. This was a deal that I bought with hard money, right? It's kind of like Murphy's Law, right? One of the few deals I buy with hard money at a high interest cost, that's the one that ends up taking twice as long. And what ended up happening was I was into this deal for like 95% of market value, almost as if I just went and bought it on the MLS at market price. And I didn't want to go and refinance and dump a bunch of money into the deal to keep it, because and quite frankly, I was emotionally just like, screw this place. I don't want to own this place long term. So I put it on the market, and I basically broke even on it, and just sold it, and sold it myself to save some commissions. And I was driving up there an hour and a half to show it, and I was like, that's a lesson learned in terms of mainly how a deal can go wrong as it relates to the rehab and everything like that. But sometimes it just don't work out, and kind of knock on wood, thank God I didn't lose money on that, and it didn't have to go worse than that. But they don't all work out well, needless to say. So some final thoughts here. Strategy is difficult to execute, mainly as a result of finding deals. The hardest part of this whole thing is just finding the good deals. Everybody knows that, but I met some guy in real estate a long time ago. He was like, if you can just find deals, you'll never be broke. So I've tried to take that to heart and just realize that if you're going to spend time or energy or money on any piece of the business in terms of getting good at it or just putting a lot of effort into it, it's just finding deals. Just because you can scale quickly doesn't really mean that you should. Scaling quickly introduces a lot of problems. Last year I bought 30 units, and we were up to 60 or so, and I sold a few of the buildings off. Scaling quickly when you don't have the infrastructure in terms of someone to, especially long distance too. And this is a problem I had, and long distance being in a market that's over an hour away for me, it's not easy to go up there every day. Having someone in place to help you manage rehabs is important. And having a plan to deal with projects that go over budget and having enough cash in the bank to kind of fuel the machine is tough when you're not flipping properties or generating income in another way, or you don't have a really high paying job or whatever it might be. So I did scale a little bit out of my shoes to the point where, had a couple of properties that were going a little longer than projected and a little over budget. The appraisals came in low, had to bring some money to the table, and I'm looking at the bank account saying, if I close these deals, then I want to be in a position where I want to be stretched a little thin. So, those deals, I end up having to go and sell properties to kind of bring some cash back into the machine and keep it going. But, it's, even if you're in them for 75%, 85% loan to value, and you're not leaving money in the deal, you still have all the transactional costs, and it's still, you don't really have income for the first 9 months of owning the place. And there's still so much out of pocket cost that comes there. That it's, you don't really know until you're kind of in that position, at least for me. So, that's a big one, number two there. And three, I always have a plan to deal with the worst case scenario. Every time I'm doing a BRRRR deal now, and I'm planning on it going, over budget, and me being in at that 95% loan to value. And I plan on having enough money to deal with that situation should that arise. Because it's not unlikely to happen. Especially when you're doing multiple deals and trying to keep a track of a lot of moving parts. And at the end of the day, increasing your day job income, just, making more money on a day-to-day basis just helps to de-risk everything. Like, I wish I'd placed a larger emphasis on flipping properties early in my career, because it would have alleviated a lot of the stress with, going over budget on projects, or, having to leave some money in deals. And, as much as everyone wants to build a buy and hold portfolio that kind of pays your bills and everything like that, and do it in a short amount of time, it can be challenging to do that given all of the costs associated with holding properties, especially in the first year of operations where you're turning it over. So for me, I wish I'd maybe sold some or maybe just, placed more of a priority on flipping to kind of build some reserves, which would have helped me buy more properties anyways. Because I quickly found myself running into walls because I didn't have a good, day-to-day income source to keep building the portfolio. And this is more applicable to young folks that are seeing this presentation, but just getting in the game is so important. Like, that first deal I did was by no means a home run. I couldn't get financing. I had to go sell it. I made maybe like 10 grand on it, 15 grand, because I paid an agent, and there was something about the septic system that disqualified it from everyone's conventional financing. It was such a pain in the ass. It was too small of a septic system, which I didn't catch on my inspection. So I had to sell it to a cash buyer, and it didn't work out the way I would have liked it to, but, made some money. And it was like, the money wasn't even important. It was just understanding that it was possible and that you can do it and everything like that. And for me, that was so critical. The first one is like so tough, and the rest are just like so much easier once you just see the process start to finish. And again, maybe it doesn't apply to this group of people that have maybe done more deals, but that's something that I mentioned to, I guess, folks that are newer. And then this is just if anyone ever wanted to get in touch with me, I'm pretty active on Instagram. That's how I linked up with Justin here. Justin was a guest on my podcast, which is a multifamily focused podcast where I invest a lot of, interview a lot of folks that are doing business in the multifamily space. Big guys, small guys, everything in between. I had Justin on there talking all about home inspections and what to look for when you're an investor walking properties. And basically I tried to have him make me a home inspector in an hour. And I don't know if I'll, if I'm going to feel as confident walking in as he is, but it was definitely a great episode. I think a really actionable episode in terms of, knowing what to look for when you're walking a basement in all these old buildings or these multifamily buildings. And I have an ebook. It's like 27 pages, kind of outlines how I found deals and stuff. And happy to email that to anyone that leaves a rating for the podcast. And yeah, if you ever wanted to email me, talk about anything, I mean, I'm more than accessible. I had some good deals, had some bad deals. So I'm always open to talk about what I found in the business. But yeah, that concludes it. I think that's my last slide there. So happy to answer any questions or anything like that. Or I don't know how you typically do these, Justin, but I'll let you kind of drive it from here.
Yeah, man. Awesome presentation. Super valuable, I think. Everything there. We did have a question in the chat. It says, can you mention the sites again for the direct prospecting? Also, expected cost, ? Or what lists are most successful? So I don't know
Sure.
if you saw this chat. If you pick up that chat, if you click the chat button, you'll see that question.
Let me see here. I'll answer while I'm looking here. But so the service that I use to do most of my or just where I buy a list is List Source. I mean, that's the popular one. Just found the chat here. I'm interrupting myself. But so I use List Source, and ListSource is really good for single families and 1 to 4 unit multifamily properties. I found that once you get to 5+ unit, the data gets a little weird because I don't know what it is about how they data scrape and do all that, but 5+, it's not nearly as good as 1 to 4. And then even 5 to 10, you get some good data, but anything 20+ I found is like useless. But it gets worse once you get to 5 units. So I use ListSource, and the way I filter my lists, I'm in a small market, so I don't have, even if I run, a lot of, even if I keep my list pretty loose in terms of the criteria, I still don't get that many names because there's just not that many properties in the cities that I'm investing in. So I do tend to leave it pretty broad. And what I'll do is like 2 to 10 unit multifamily properties. I make it so that the last sale was more than 5 years ago. So I do like most recent sale date is like 2014 or 2015. I try and do, typically I do 2 lists. One where it's corporate only owned, which is almost different than what a lot of other folks do, where they want everything that's only owned by individuals, because it typically is a sign that the owner is a little bit less sophisticated than someone who's buying a property in an LLC. However, for me, where I'm doing a lot of the email prospecting, I like LLCs because I can go look at the Secretary of State site or whatever. I don't know if it's different in New Jersey than it is in New Hampshire, but basically in my state, on the Secretary of State site, whoever created the LLC has to register their email address. So I basically get their email address, and there I have a way to contact them through email. And it's harder, I found, to get people's emails through like a skip tracing website or something like that if they're, if you just have their name. So that's the reason I do it. If it's, if the Secretary of State site doesn't give you their email, then I'd probably just get a master list, try and find who the registered agent person is for the LLC, and then just go and skip trace their information on a website like Spokio, or there's some other sites that do this too. Openlettermarketing.com is who I've used for my direct mail. And they also offer a service where they'll do skip tracing. And I forget what they charge per record, but it's like negligible. Like you could do a record of like 500 names for like 50, 60 bucks or something. And that's typically what it costs on ListSource, is maybe like 15 cents a record or something like that. So you get a list of 500, addresses, names for 70, 75 bucks, something like that. And then I'll just skip trace them, get all that into a CRM. And then I'll just start going from there and reaching out to those folks.
How do you keep track of your your list in terms of like when you send them, how often you send them? Is that part of the CRM model, or do you have some other program or whatever that you can track that with? Like, say email this person or text this person, this date, got a call here, got a text here, so and so.
Yeah. So a lot of folks, there's a lot of CRMs where you can just do it through the CRM. You'll have to pay for those a little bit more. Those are the good ones where you can send texts and emails directly from the CRM. I kind of look at it a little bit differently though. First of all, that's the best way to do it if you really want to make sure you're tracking everything at its highest level. I personally don't classify myself as someone that's doing enough volume to justify the cost of a CRM like that, and as someone that really needs that level of tracking. So for me, put everything in the CRM. I'll just go ahead and email them off my personal email account so that it looks natural, right? So, when you send an email off of a CRM, oftentimes it looks like it's, an email you get from a company, and, that just doesn't look great to an owner, right? So for me, I'm going on my personal email, I'm going out there and I'm emailing them, and I just field my replies to my own email address. And a little cool hack in Gmail for those that use Gmail is you can set up templates. If you just Google like how to set up templates on Gmail, you'll see. But basically, it allows you to just click a template, and it just auto loads emails into your email on Gmail. So you can kind of systematize that and really get it going. So I do that, and then I'll go into my CRM, go into the contact, or however it's classified in the CRM you use. For me, it's contact. I go into that. I log, emailed on September 9th, 2020, and then I'll go log a follow-up task. And then that'll, I'll kick that out a week or however long I want to wait before I email them again. And then I'll have it on my dashboard on my CRM. This is how it's laid out. Most CRMs, it's like this too. So And then I'll know, log on a week, I'll have a task sitting there for me to go email, John Smith again. And for me, I have like first email I send in a Word doc, the second email, and this is what I put in templates in Gmail. And I already systematized that. These are the first 5 emails I send to a person. And then after that, I'll send them, that first email once every 4 months or something like that. And just really just try and stay in touch on a longer term basis. So, it's not a Fortune 500 sales strategy by any means, but it's enough to just kind of keep track of it and to give you reminders.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone else have any other questions for Axel? No? All right, cool. Yeah, reach out to Axel on Instagram, LinkedIn. Definitely check out his podcast. Super valuable information on there. He has all kinds of guests on there. It's been really valuable for me, and looking forward to hearing our episode too. But yeah, if nobody else has any more questions, we'll go ahead and end it. Again, I appreciate you coming on, man. And we'll talk soon.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate the invite, and thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully you got some value out of it. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you ever want to talk more about any of this stuff. Always happy to.
All right, man. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right, you guys have a good one.
All right. See you.